The most surprising thing about crows so far has been their ability to recognize and remember particular people, and even particular faces. You might think you have privacy when you step outside your house, but you are wrong. There is a surveillance, network tracking your every move, logging your face, and even gossiping about your habits to the neighbors. It is not a satellite system, and it is not your smartphone. It is sitting on the power line right above your head. Basically, crows exist where people exist. Even in the remote wilderness, you will often find them wherever there is a campground or something similar. Scientists have recently fed thousands of hours of crow sounds into advanced artificial intelligence, expecting to hear random animal noise. But here's the twist. The computer did not hear noise. It heard a language. And what they are saying about you is terrifying. The goal was simple. Researchers wanted to see if the machine could sort the noises, putting the "I found food" sounds in one box and the "there is a hawk" sounds in another. It was supposed to be a basic sorting task. But here is the catch. The AI did not just sort the noises. It started to find patterns that surprised the researchers. Well, not literally panic, but the data output spiked in a way that made little sense to the human observers. The computer was finding patterns that seemed far too complex for what researchers expected from a bird. Basically, the AI was finding syntax. In human language, syntax is the set of rules that make a sentence make sense. It is the difference between saying, "The cat sat on the mat," and "Matt, cat the sat on." One conveys information. The other is gibberish. We always assumed animal noises were just emotional gibberish. A dog barks because it is excited. A cat purrs because it is happy. But the AI was seeing structure. It was seeing something that looked like grammar. The researchers watched as the machine isolated a specific sequence of sounds. Let us call it the red hat sequence. In the recordings, a man wearing a red hat walked through a park. A crow called out. To a human ear, it sounded like any other screech, but the AI analyzed the frequency, pitch, and spacing between the notes. It tagged the sound as a unique identifier. 3 days later, in the data, the same man walked through the park again. The same crow made the sound again. That was interesting, but not necessarily groundbreaking. A dog knows its owner, after all. But then things got weird. A week later, a different crow, one that had never seen the man before, made the exact same sound when the man walked by. Do you realize what that could mean? It suggests that the first crow may not have simply made a random noise. It may have communicated information about the man to other crows. The AI suggested that this specific sound was associated with that individual and was not being used for everyone else. In other words, they may have effectively named him. And that is putting it lightly. The deeper the AI analysis went, the more surprising the results became. It found that these conversations were not just happening in the moment. The machine detected patterns that appeared to occur before certain events. Crows were gathering in trees and making complex sequences of sounds that researchers interpreted as possible planning or coordination. They were not simply reacting to the world. They appeared to be communicating about what was happening around them. The analysis suggested that a significant portion of their communication may revolve around us, humans. We may be major characters in their world. The AI picked up distinct patterns associated with different types of humans. Some appeared neutral, while others seemed negative. There could be differences between calls associated with a human carrying food and a human carrying something threatening. For centuries, we have looked at crows and seen pests or scavengers. We threw rocks at them or shooed them away, thinking they were simply mindless birds. But all the time, they may have been paying attention. They were building memories of the people around them. And now that we have technology capable of analyzing those patterns, the question is not simply whether crows can communicate. The bigger question is what they might be capable of communicating about us. If they have individual calls associated with people, do they also maintain long-term reputations? Research suggests that crows can remember individuals and learn from the experiences of other birds. Your reputation in the crow world might outlast your car. You might have a criminal record in the sky without even knowing it exists. And the craziest part is that researchers are only beginning to understand their communication. What lies underneath their chatter could reveal a level of intelligence that forces us to rethink what we mean by animal communication. So how is this even possible? We are talking about a bird, right? An animal with a relatively small brain. It does not seem physically possible for a creature that small to have such complex cognitive abilities. But here's the problem. We have been measuring intelligence incorrectly for a very long time. We used to think the cerebral cortex was the only thing that mattered. That is the wrinkled outer layer of the brain that humans have, where much of our thinking, planning, and problem solving takes place. Birds do not have a cerebral cortex like ours, so for a long time, scientists... But these crows make tools. And they do not simply pick up a stick. They manufacture tools. There's a particular plant with long, spiky leaves that New Caledonian crows can modify. Scientists have observed these birds cutting and shaping leaves into specialized tools. They create jagged edges that are effective for hooking insects out of deep holes. This is not accidental. It is engineering. The crow has a goal, modifies an object to achieve that goal, and then uses the finished tool. If the tool breaks, the bird can modify it. If the right material is unavailable, it can improvise with other materials. But the real mind bender is the water displacement experiment. You might know the old story of the crow and the pitcher. The bird drops stones into a container to raise the water level until it can reach the water. Researchers wanted to see whether crows could actually understand the principle behind the trick. They placed a tube of water in front of a crow with a floating treat inside. The crow could not reach the treat directly. Nearby, researchers placed heavy stones and lightweight floating objects. A less capable animal might simply throw everything into the tube. But the crow examined the objects. It looked at the stones, looked at the floating material, paused, and then began dropping the heavy stones into the water one by one. It ignored the floating objects. The bird understood that the heavy objects would displace water while the floating objects would not. That is a surprisingly sophisticated physical problem to solve. And it does not stop there. Crows also demonstrate an understanding of cause and effect. In another type of experiment, crows have been presented with puzzle boxes in which they had to perform a sequence of actions to reach food. When one action triggered another hidden mechanism, they could work out the sequence and use tools to reach the final reward. They can build mental models of how objects and mechanisms work. So when we study crow communication, we should not be surprised to find sophisticated information processing behind it. They are not simply operating on instinct. They can analyze their environment, test possibilities, remember outcomes, and adjust their behavior. The unsettling part is not that they use tools. It is that they may also be capable of treating humans as another problem to understand. They know how to manipulate objects. So why would they not learn how to predict and influence us? It is not just that crows are intelligent. It is that they can remember a grudge. And this is where the story gets personal. If you think you can mess with a crow and simply walk away, you may be making a serious mistake. Back in 2006, researcher John Marsleff at the University of Washington wanted to test whether crows could recognize individual human faces. He did not want to get attacked himself, so he used a mask, specifically a caveman mask, while capturing and tagging crows on campus for scientific research. The birds clearly did not appreciate the experience. They screamed, struggled, and eventually were released. Marsleff then removed the mask and returned to his normal life. He also had a control mask representing another public figure. When he walked around wearing the control mask, the crows did not seem to care, but the moment he put the caveman mask back on, the reaction changed. The crows became aggressive. They scolded him, dive-bombed him, and followed him across campus. At first, you might think that was simply because the 7 birds he had captured remembered him. But that was not the most interesting part. As the days and weeks passed, more crows began reacting to the mask. Birds that had never been captured began attacking it. Even more remarkably, the response persisted for years. Marsleff could return to the campus years later wearing the same mask and still receive the same hostile reaction. Many of the original birds were gone, but younger birds appeared to have learned the identity of the threatening face. That demonstrated something extraordinary. Crows can recognize individual human faces, remember them for years, and potentially spread information about dangerous people to other members of their social group. It was essentially a wanted poster in the sky. The research into crow communication fits perfectly with this ability. Crows can distinguish between individual people. They can remember who feeds them and who threatens them. They are constantly updating their memories based on experience. If you feed a crow while your neighbor throws rocks at it, the bird may learn the difference between the two of you. It could approach you and avoid your neighbor. They know the difference. When a person enters an area, nearby crows can react almost immediately. It is almost like a broadcast system. You might change your clothes, but you cannot easily change your face. And because information can spread through social groups, a crow that has learned something about you may influence the behavior of other birds. The idea sounds almost like a surveillance network. We are living in a panopticon, and the guards have wings. They may be watching us, remembering our behavior, and deciding whether we are friend or foe. If facial recognition sounds creepy, wait until you consider their social behavior. Because this is not simply biology. Crows have complex social lives. When a crow dies, other crows sometimes gather around the body. If you have ever seen this, it can be chilling. One bird discovers the body and makes a call. Other crows arrive and gather in nearby trees. They do not necessarily eat the dead bird or immediately fly away. Instead, they appear to inspect the scene. Scientists have debated whether this behavior represents grief, learning, or threat assessment. One possibility is that the gathering allows crows to learn what caused the death. Was it a predator, a car, a human, another threat? If so, the gathering could serve as a way to collect information that benefits the surviving birds. In that sense, what looks like a funeral might also function as a lesson. Crows also have complex social hierarchies. They can compete over food, establish relationships, and respond collectively to social conflicts. Their behavior suggests that they are capable of remembering individuals and adjusting their interactions based on past experiences. And this judgment can extend to humans. Crows can distinguish between people carrying different objects and can respond differently to humans who behave threateningly versus those who do not. If you walk outside with something harmless, they may ignore you. If you behave aggressively toward them, they may disappear before you even have a chance to get close. They can be remarkably good at reading the behavior of other animals, including us, but there is also a positive side. People who regularly feed crows sometimes report receiving objects in return, including small pieces of glass, beads, and other interesting items. Whether this represents deliberate gift-giving in the human sense is still debated, but the behavior is fascinating. Crows can remember people who provide food and can develop long-term associations with them. That means their social world is not simply about danger. It also includes cooperation, opportunity, and relationships. This level of social complexity means crows are not simply surviving in our world. They are building their own social world alongside ours. They have relationships, memories, hierarchies, and long-term traditions. And right now, researchers are only beginning to understand how much information they exchange. Here's where everything comes together. We have talked about how crows recognize us, but we also need to consider how they share information with one another. Crow populations can have regional dialects. A crow in one location may sound different from a crow somewhere else. That makes sense because vocal traditions can develop within local groups. But researchers have also found evidence that some learned behaviors and calls can spread between groups. A new warning response can potentially move from one flock to another as birds encounter unfamiliar threats. It is almost like an analog internet. They are not writing books or posting online, but they can still transmit information through social learning. That means a new danger does not necessarily have to be rediscovered by every generation. Young birds can learn from older birds. They can inherit information through behavior and social interaction. Humans are not the only species capable of accumulating knowledge across generations. Crows can do it too. They are not necessarily starting from zero every generation. They can stand on the shoulders of the crows that came before them. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. Some claims about AI decoding crow language have been exaggerated, and scientists have not demonstrated that crows possess a human-like language with fully decoded grammar or secret conversations about individual people. However, researchers are genuinely using artificial intelligence and machine learning to analyze animal vocalizations, and that raises an intriguing possibility. What if there are patterns in crow communication that humans simply have not recognized yet? An artificial intelligence system could process enormous amounts of bioacoustic data, cataloging calls, clicks, rattles, and other sounds. The algorithm might begin identifying patterns that humans would struggle to notice. It could reveal differences between alarm calls, social calls, food-related sounds, and calls associated with particular individuals or situations. But if the patterns suddenly changed, the machine might struggle. That would not necessarily mean the crows had discovered the microphones or intentionally changed their language to fool researchers. There are many possible explanations. Changes in the environment, social structure, predators, food availability, or local populations could all alter vocal behavior. Still, the idea raises an intriguing question. Could an intelligent animal recognize that its behavior is being studied? Crows are known for testing their environment. They learn from consequences, observe other animals, and adjust their behavior based on experience. So it is not unreasonable to wonder whether they could adapt when their circumstances change. But there is an enormous difference between adapting behavior and deliberately creating an encrypted language. At present, there is no solid evidence that crows have discovered that researchers are decoding their calls and responded by changing their communication into a secret cipher. That part belongs more to science fiction than established science. But the real science is already strange enough. Crows can solve multi-step problems. They can use and manufacture tools. They can recognize individual human faces. They can remember threatening people for years. They can learn from one another. They can pass information between generations. And they can adapt their behavior based on experience. So perhaps the most fascinating question is not whether crows are secretly plotting against us. It is whether we have underestimated how much information is passing between them every day. If future research eventually reveals that crow communication is far more sophisticated than we currently understand, it would not be completely unexpected. It would simply mean that we have been listening to the wrong part of the conversation. So the next time you see a crow watching you from a telephone wire, ask yourself, Is it just a bird observing the world around it, or is it remembering you? Maybe it knows your face. Maybe another crow already knows what you did. And maybe the strangest thing about crows is not that they are watching us. It is that we are only beginning to understand how much they have been watching all along. What do you think about crow intelligence and communication? Could these birds be far more sophisticated than we currently realize?